so much of that felt so personal. And also, I had no idea if I would even be able to sell this. So it was really something I did for myself.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this amazing Q&A with Jessica Knoll. I'm so excited to get started and start asking all the questions that I have. If you guys have any questions, then please feel free to pop them in the Q&A function in the chat, and me and Jessica will try and get through as many as possible. So we've got the lovely Jessica here for an hour with us. So yeah, please make sure that you get your questions in. Um, and hello, everyone, as well, that may be watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify. It's so lovely to have you. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us. What time is it then where you are, by the way?
It's 2:30, and if you're wondering why I'm in bed 2:30 in the afternoon in New York, it's because I'm actually in a vacation rental for the next 2 weeks, and my toddler is here, and the babysitter is with her, and there's really nowhere else in the house I can go to do this without her bothering me. So I've locked the door to my bedroom, and I'm all yours for the next hour.
This, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, especially, yeah, whilst you're on vacation. I mean, it's
I know.
7:30
I
UK for us.
think when I agreed to this, I just said yes to like everything that came up, and I wasn't even really looking at my calendar, and I was like, "Oh, okay." But I mean, whatever. What else am I doing?
Bessie, having a life is what you're doing, having
Yeah, that's
vacation. I
true.
mean, you
Yeah.
deserve
Yeah,
it.
sometimes we forget about that part in America.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So, for everyone that's joined, I'm sure you already know, but Jessica Knoll is a New York Times bestselling novelist, screenwriter, and former magazine editor. Um, and as a lot of us have read, Bright Young Women, it's that which is just an absolutely incredible book. But she also has lots of other books as well. We've got Luckiest Girl Alive, which was her debut novel in 2015, which has now been adapted into a Netflix film, which is absolutely incredible, which Jessica has
Mhm.
also written the screenplay for, which is so exciting. How did you find that writing the screenplay for, I mean, your own book?
Yeah. I loved it. And some of my other books are in various stages of development, and I'm developing writing those myself. So I really like that part of the process. Some authors are very content to just turn it over and be done with it and move on to their next project, but I like being with it all the way and seeing it all the way through.
Amazing. That must be so like, does it make you feel like, I mean, obviously being in a New York Times bestseller, like you kind of get this feeling of accomplishment anyway, but does it make you feel like, wow, I've really done something that, people want to pick it up and adapt it for the screen?
Yeah, I think also the collaborative nature of making a film or a show is really appealing to me because writing a book is a very solitary endeavor. And, being on set for about 4 months while we filmed Luckiest Girl Alive. And then there was a year of post after that where I was living in California at the time, but I was flying to New York a lot to be in the editing room. I just loved it. I loved being around other creatives. I loved learning about all the different departments and every single person, every single HOD, head of a department, whether it was like makeup, costume, set design, like everyone's an artist in their own way. And it was absolutely so fulfilling and satisfying to collaborate with like the best in the business over this character that you've created and bring every facet of them to life. Like it's one of the highs of like the high points of my career for sure.
That's so amazing. Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. Um, I'd love to ask you a bit more about kind of your writing journey. So, was becoming an author always the dream, or did it kind of happen a bit gradually?
I always knew I wanted to write. I didn't know how I would do that and make a career and the livelihood from it. When I first graduated from college, I got a job at a talent and literary agency on the advice of my screenwriting professor, who said I could get a sense of the business side of things and I could maybe see, like, get a glimpse into the marketplace and see, like, what was selling, what was doing well. But I ended up getting a job as an assistant to an agent in the talent department. So I really wasn't that involved. Like I wanted to be in the literary department, but it was a small agency. There weren't a lot of spots open. And probably after about a year, I knew that this wasn't leading me to where I wanted to be. But it got me to New York and I became familiar with the media scene there. And this was like 2009, 2010. And so I was like, wow, I always loved magazines growing up. I still have like my collection of Allures and Vogues and my teen mags like YM. I don't know if you guys have those in the UK. And I just realized there was a whole magazine publishing industry in New York that for some reason was never brought up as a possibility for someone like me who was interested in writing. So um, I was able, thankfully, to get a job at Cosmopolitan as an assistant. And then I spent about 5 years there and moved up to senior editor. And while I was there, a lot of the other top editors had separate writing careers, like had written books, new literary agents, like, I was able to watch and learn how the process worked. And so it was from there that I realized, like, oh, this is something I could actually do. I could publish a book one day.
Oh, that's so amazing. Did it feel quite scary to make that leap between working in magazines to then writing and publishing fiction?
Well, I wrote Luckiest Girl Alive while I still had my job. So I was, it's fiction. So you have, the rule is the whole thing has to be written in order for it to sell. So I wrote the book at my kitchen table at like 6:30 in the morning before work, like an hour each day. And I probably completed the manuscript, that first draft, in like 11 months. Like I did it fairly quickly for not writing that much each day, but it was a very like concentrated and dedicated hours. So I got a lot done. And then when my agent and I sold the book, I still stayed on and I had moved over to Self magazine at that point. I don't know if you guys had Self. It was a fitness and health magazine. It's now only online. But at the time there was still the print version and I had moved over there. I'd taken a job there and I kept that job until about, I would say, like 8 months before the book came out because I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if the book would do well. I didn't know if this could be like a long, kind of a long-term thing. But the reason I ended up leaving my job before the book published was because I felt that at the time, magazines were one of the most reliable ways to get the word out about a book. Like if a magazine had like a fiction reads roundup or like books they were recommending on their website, and it was hindering me to be tied to one brand because then it was like these other magazines, like no one will interview me, no one will recommend my book because it's a conflict of interest, whatever. So I took the leap and I just figured I can always go back to magazines if I have to. But thankfully, the novel writing thing worked out.
Well, absolutely. And I'm not surprised it worked out because of how incredible your novels are. And I just think it takes a lot of guts to kind of make that leap, but I guess it was still very, clever to kind of have, your magazine job still in
Mhm.
the pipeline whilst you're writing your first books. That's all really interesting. Um, I wanted to ask, like, looking back now, how different was it when you were writing Luckiest Girl Alive compared to writing Bright Young Women and your other books? And do you feel like you're a completely different writer now?
Well, Luckiest Girl Alive, and I've written about this and spoken about this many times over the year. There were a lot of things in that novel that were inspired by real life, and so um, it kind of poured out of me in terms of, you know, just formative events that had happened when I was younger and some kind of unresolved trauma that, I was looking for a way to sort out and writing really kind of not only was it cathartic, but it was clarifying for me in a lot of ways. So much of that felt so personal. And also, I had no idea if I would even be able to sell this. So it was really something I did for myself. So every book I've written after, I've had a contract, I've had an editor, I've had an agent, and it's a little bit different because the motivation is a little outside in instead of inside out. So sometimes it feels like I'm having to consider a lot of different people. I'm having to consider the marketplace. I'm having to consider what my editor thinks, what my publicist thinks, what my motion picture agent thinks. So it can it's a lot of voices in your head, a lot of noise. So writing Luckiest Girl was probably like the purest artistic 10 months of my life, where it just really was coming from my heart and from my soul. Now it is, there's more calculations that have to be made. Um, I, particularly with bright young women, I had to do a lot of research because it was inspired by true events that happened in the 1970s. And also in a different part of the country than I knew, Florida, particularly. I'm from the Northeast, I'm from Pennsylvania, like the Philadelphia area. And I went to college in New York State, not New York City. New York State is a very big state. So it was probably like 6 hours from New York City. And then after I graduated, I moved to New York City. And then I lived in Los Angeles and then I moved back to New York. So I did not know Florida at all. It's also a very big state, and the area where these crimes occurred is considered one of the more kind of traditional areas of the state in terms of like old Southern traditions. So I knew nothing about any of that. Also, my college did not have fraternities and sororities, so I didn't know anything about how those operated. So I had to do a lot of research about the pledging process, what it was like to live with your older sisters, what, if any, they were, hazing rituals were there back then. And then just trying to make sure that I was accurate with the language and the way young people spoke to each other in a totally different decade than I grew up in a way that didn't feel contrived and hokey. So, like a lot went in behind the scenes of writing that book. And there were times where I worried I wasn't up to task for it. But I'm glad I did it because now I know like I can challenge myself and I can take on a subject matter that I'm not personally like somehow associated with, and I can still spin a yarn more or less.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's talent in both of those aspects. Like there's obviously talent in like being able to research and write about a topic that you're not so familiar with, but also writing about own personal experiences is a talent in itself because obviously difficult things are brought up. And like you said, you've been very open about that. And I think it's so interesting to be able to write about your own personal experiences and I guess turn it into a positive in a way.
Mhm.
Did you find it therapeutic in a way to write Luckiest Girl Alive, or was it like was it a bit of an emotional roller coaster? What did that kind of bring up for you?
Um, I mean, the only thing that has ever really been therapeutic is therapy. Um, but I will say writing Luckiest Girl and then being open about my own experience as a survivor of sexual assault forced me into therapy because
Mhm.
there was a lot I had not yet dealt with. So the therapeutic part came from actually going to my therapist, who I'm still with all these years later, like 11 years later. Um, and yes, and helped me heal. I don't know. Heal is like it's one of those words that's so ubiquitous at this point. I'm not really quite sure what it means anymore, but it gave me awareness, a kind of self-awareness around what had happened to me, why it had happened to me, and the ways in which it was weirdly still happening to me because it was a lot about um not knowing how to set boundaries. Like no one ever taught me to do that. No one ever taught me how to protect myself or advocate for myself. So in smaller ways, violations were still happening, maybe not at the physical sort. Um, but so therapy was what brought my attention and my awareness up around all of those things so that I could move through the world as a more whole person and a person who um, knows who she is, knows what she likes, knows what she doesn't like, and knows how to voice all of that too. Because that was not something I knew how to do prior to writing the book, which then led me to therapy to learn all of those tools.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. I just think that's really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And like I'd just like to kind of discuss a bit more about your kind of writing process. I've heard that you're like very much a morning writer. Is that still true? And do you have anything that kind of helps you to get in the zone when it comes to writing?
Yeah, I write. I mean, with Luckiest Girl, it was like first thing in the morning. Like my alarm would go off. I would grab a cup of coffee and sit down and write. Obviously, um, now that I'm a mom, it's a little bit different. My nanny comes around 9 a.m. So I'm up with my daughter around like 7:30 and everything like getting her ready for school, feeding her breakfast. Like I'm doing a bunch of things. So it's not writing is not the first thing I do in the morning. But once my nanny comes, or if it's the school year and I've dropped her off at school, then, that is writing is the thing I try to get to right away. Just because I feel like I'm as fresh as I can possibly be. The as the day stretches on, I feel less and less sharp and less creative. Sometimes at night, after I put my daughter down and the house is quiet again and I have a glass of wine, like occasionally I can get a little writing done then because it feels like, the house is mine again or my time is mine again. But mostly, yes, it is something I do in the morning. It's something I do with a cup of coffee. And I don't write for that long. I wish I could write long. I wish I had it in me to write for longer stretches of time, but I kind of tap out around 1.5, 2 hours. And um, if I push it, I find I'm just kind of like sitting there and I'm just frustrating myself and I'm not actually getting anything done. So I really try and just like get up and walk away and like do something else that can like replenish my reserves, whatever that might be. If it's like taking a walk, just like getting some errands done, or even just reading a little bit. The deeper I get into a project, the longer I can write for. So that because I just know the characters in the story a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, to kind of be able to know that, that's kind of your limit and like actually I need to get up and do something else. I think that's
Mhm.
really good. And it's interesting how people are so different because I'm kind of the opposite. I can only be productive in the evening and I don't know what it is,
Oh,
but first
interesting.
thing in the morning, I need a lot to wake me up.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I've never heard anyone say afternoon though. Evening I can get,
No.
um, but afternoon is like siesta time.
Yeah,
Escape from
absolutely.
bed at 2:45 in the afternoon, my time.
I feel like that's kind of like when I crash. I'm like I kind of go
Yeah,
through like, oh, late morning, I'm guessing there, crash early afternoon,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
evening is
lunch
when
and
most
then evening.
productive.
Yeah.
So interesting how we're all different. But yeah, I can't say I've heard anyone say afternoon either.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about publishing and kind of what it was like to publish your books. Is there anything that particularly surprised you when you published your first novel?
Yeah, I think I was surprised by how involved I was or I felt I needed to be in the marketing and publicity aspects of it because I just thought you wrote your book, you handled your editor's notes, you did the revise, and then it was off to the printer and marketing and publicity took care of it. And I think my experience in magazines and just knowing a little bit about what it takes to like get a product out into the world that it doesn't just happen. There's like a lot of work that has to go into like launching a successful product. Um, I think you're when you get your publishing deal, you're assigned your editor, your publicist at the publishing house, and then um, the head of your marketing. And I just felt like, oh, I know a lot of people in this industry. Like, I think we should send a book to this person. I can write a letter to this person. And so then before I knew it, I was pretty intimately involved in the process, and I kind of remain that way. So I remember that coming as such a surprise with my first book. I really thought the job was done when I turned it my last revision. Um, but I've learned since, like, that's only, that's one part of it. That's maybe 50% of the job. And the other 50% is everything that goes around getting that book out into the world.
Yeah, that's so great that you get to be a part of it. I think that's amazing. Do you ever get a say on your book covers?
Yes, so the designers always come to us. I guess they technically go to your editor and maybe some like in-house
Mhm.
people at the publishing house first, because if they're really, if they're really off base and they're definitely not going to work, the editor won't even bother sharing them with you. They'll have them, go back and try again. And when your editor feels like they've got a strong batch, they'll submit to you, and you and your agent, you'll kind of go over them together. Um, I'm trying to think, like, for the most part, for the most part, you don't really land on it the first time. And sometimes it's like I really love something and my editor doesn't, or my editor really loves something and I don't. So it's a little bit of it's a collaboration, and you want to like take in all opinions, especially from the sales and marketing team, in terms of like, this is a cover that like Target would buy. You know what I mean? This is a cover Target wouldn't buy. So you're like, okay, I want a cover Target will buy, but I also want a cover I like. So can we like explore this kind of color palette or whatever it is we're going with? But I'm not quite feeling like this batch. So like, I don't know. Yeah, like it's kind of the same thing with the title too. You kind of knock around a couple of things until it feels like everyone lands on something that we're, for the most part, all in agreement with.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned about the title because I remember when I found out kind of about the title for Bright Young Women and what that kind of related to, I couldn't believe it. I just thought, oh my goodness, that's such a
Yeah.
clever way to spin that. And it kind of leads me on onto like discussing Bright Young Women anyway, because it's
Mhm.
a book that a lot of our book clubs have been reading and have really enjoyed. And one of the things that I loved most about Bright Young Women is that it refuses to give the killer center stage,
Mhm.
and that it really like focuses on the women and the victims. Was that always your vision for the book?
Mhm. Oh, definitely. Since the day I heard the judge address him as a bright young man, I was like, what about the bright young women? And then when I actually started to do the research into it, what I was most struck by was the fact that he was so mediocre and all the evidence was right there. And then the more I looked into the sororities that he targeted and the college students that he also victimized, I just found like it was, what I found to be a common theme was that he he chose campuses where he knew he would find high achieving women. So part of me feels like he was um he was very self-conscious and had a lot of self-loathing and self-hatred because he wanted to be very successful. He wanted to be worldly and sophisticated. He spoke with an affect um, that he had just developed. It wasn't something that naturally ran in his family or had anything to do with like his upbringing, which was not elite in any sense of the word. Um, so it felt like he was acting out of his own like these were his own demons. Like he had no way of living up to his own expectations, because he wasn't hardworking enough and he wasn't talented enough. So he lashed out and went after the women who, were capable of the things that he was not.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. And I felt exactly the same when I kind of looked into it and heard about everything that was going on. It's like this man is just a man. There's nothing about
There's
him.
nothing
And
special
then
about
you're saying that about him. And and all the things calling him attractive. I'm just like, why are you saying that?
right, right.
Yeah, absolutely. Which yeah, it's why I absolutely loved this. Really focused on the women, and the title just does an amazing job at that. Um, so I read that an early version of the novel was told from the perspective of the sorority sister who did the initial police sketch,
Mm.
before your editor suggested like rewriting it from Pamela's perspective. And
Yeah,
that's such a big change. Like, how
I
did you
know.
feel
Oh
when
my
that came
God.
back?
Can you believe I have a whole novel from Cindy's point of view, and then it became about Pamela. Um Yeah, because Pamela was, the sorority president, and she just had a very strong presence, love her or hate her. I think we all know that type, the super type A type. And, she's the one organizing everything. She's the stickler for the rules, and there's like some humor to be had there. And like everyone loves her, but maybe behind their back, they're like rolling their eyes at her. They're like, can you chill out? And so that was kind of that was how Cindy perceived Pamela, and as like being lovable but a little bit of a pain in her ass. And my editor was like, that's a really interesting character. Like we would, and it was my agent and my editor both said like we would love to hear more from Pamela. And as soon as I sat down and like gave myself permission to write from that perspective, and to like I'm like I that's not me. I'm not that type. I'm not organized. I'm not type A. Like I'm I'm just like I'm very like flighty. It's like the only thing I can really focus on is like my writing. Like everything else, it's like my calendar is a mess. Like I'm all over the place. So when I like really put myself in Pamela's shoes, it was so much fun to experience life um as someone who goes through it like that, but just also sounded really exhausting. But I have such a tender spot for her. Like she's just, she has her own charm, I think, because like she's so tightly wound. And I just had a lot of fun with her.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of felt the same way about her. I think she's such an interesting character.
Yeah.
Um, did it feel like a lot of work to have to rewrite it, or was it like so interesting that you kind of got lost in it? Was it a mix of both? Like, how did that
No,
feel
it
for
was a lot.
you?
It's a lot of work. I mean, all of my
Mhm.
novels, unfortunately, tend to need many, many revisions before I get to a place where like it's all working. And that's just my process. The only exception is Luckiest Girl Alive, which poured out of me fully formed. And I've now written 3 books since then, and it's never happened again. It has, and every time I think like, oh, I nailed it with this one, like I cracked the code, and like I turn it in, my editor is like, there is something here, but it's not working in the execution. Like maybe we could try this, maybe you could try this, think about this. This is where I'm leaning in, this is where my eyes are glazing over. And that happens several more times. So in the end, I've probably written close to like 800 pages of things that will never see the light of day until I get to kind of my final 300. So yeah, it's a lot of work. And that's also why I enjoy the adaptation process so much, because going back to the drawing board by yourself again and again can like really take its toll on you. Like it's hard to keep your morale up. So it's nice to break that up with a kind of writing that one is like based on characters and worlds I've already created, and like the plot's already there. So it's automatically like an easier lift for me. And two, the page count is much shorter, and there's just more collaboration as you're working on it with the producers and the executives, like giving you feedback. So you feel like you have this kind of regular human connection that you don't with a novel where you're like, okay, see you in 8 months when I get you the next draft, you know? Um, so yeah, so it's a long road to for me at least to get a novel completed.
So worth it though. So worth
It is.
it.
Yes, in the end it is. It feels great. It feels wonderful to like hold something finished in your hands and like see it in bookstores. But I have no doubt that even with my next one, like I will hit that point of despair and be like, it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. And then it does.
It does. It all works
Find my
out.
way out. Yeah.
That's really interesting to hear. And it's kind of nice to know that, a lot of people kind of go through that as well. So
Oh yeah.
that's really interesting. I've got a couple of questions in the Q&A chat that I thought I'd bring up now because we're discussing Bright Young Women. So somebody has asked, how was it writing about real life events in Bright Young Women when the events are sensitive and in recent history with relatives of victims still alive? Did you have much interaction with the families and friends of the victims?
So I actually interviewed one of the survivors from the attack on the Florida sorority house. And she was the one that said to me, she was like, if you actually look at him, like he was like not, she's like, everyone was talking about how handsome he was. And I would just look at him in the courtroom and be like, what is everyone seeing that I don't see? She's like, he wasn't that smart, he wasn't that handsome. She was like, and he had she was like, he was weird. Like women knew he was weird. Like he gave you the creeps. Like every woman like would get that gut feeling. You know, every woman knows that gut feeling around a certain type of guy where you're just like, oh God, like I need to get away from this person. So it was really, really I was really grateful to her for sharing her experience and being like so open and vulnerable about it. And I had reached out to another one of the sorority sisters who was not attacked, but she was in the house the night of the attack. And we had like sent a few emails back and forth, and she had agreed to be interviewed. And then like I suggested times, and then I just like never heard from her again. And that happened with like someone else. So I got close, but my only interview was with the survivor of the Florida attack. And yeah, I mean, my big thing was I tried to write characters that were not based on any of the real victims. Um, like I researched as many of the victims as I could, and then I made sure that I was creating characters that did not share any of the traits um, with the actual women involved, so that I wasn't purposing any parts of like their story for a fiction novel. And I just tried again to like really focus on the fact that like this was fiction, but this was a book in general about how there is we tend to romanticize crime and true crime, whether it's TV, film, book, podcast. And over the years, we've spent a lot of time, the way these stories are told, they have focused on the men who have committed these crimes and not on the women who either survived them or what their lives could have been, um, if if they weren't taken from them so young. So I really use that as like my guidepost and like my North Star, as I crafted this story and worked on it. Um, and felt that this was a way not only to like shift the way we are telling these stories, but again, it was like I felt I had skin in the game because I'm a survivor of sexual violence, and I have felt like the way survivors of sexual violence have been written about for like many, many years and depicted on TV does not at all ring true to my own experience. And so it was like another level for me to like go in and just explore characters who came out of this and like um found purpose and meaning, like did not let this thing define them and went on to like live full lives, you know, and that's something I feel I've done. And so it was like very important to me to create characters who did that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so incredible. And that's amazing that you got to, speak to a survivor and kind of, you know, have her share that story with you, which is just amazing, and use that as inspiration for your work. But I really like how it's not completely linked, but it's still giving a story, which is so it's just so interesting because like you say, um a lot of things in the media kind of focus on these defendants or perpetrators, whatever word you want to use for them, and actually you gave a voice to the women, and I just think that is something that really kind of sets writing women aside from other books that are kind of linked in with true crime but also fiction in themselves, and I just think
Mhm.
that's something that's so amazing within that piece of work.
Thank
um
you.
yeah, so Francesca has also got a question about Bright Young Women. She said, I felt very tense when reading Bright Young Women, even though I knew roughly what was going to happen. How did it feel to write?
Yeah, I always feel funny when people ask me things like that because I'm like, fine. Like it doesn't I've never written anything that has gotten under my skin and disturbed me. And I think it's a little bit because I'm creating it. So I I know what the monster looks like. I know when it's hiding behind the corner. You know, it's like it's a little hard to scare yourself with your own
Mm.
story. Um because you're the mastermind of it. And you're controlling what happens next. And although these were based on real crimes, they did feel removed because they were over 50 years ago and they took place in a different part of the country than where I lived. However, things that have gotten under my skin, I don't know if you've read the Golden State Killer book
No, I
about the
haven't.
serial killer in California. So
Mm.
that was another very prolific serial killer from the 70s and 80s. And they actually finally identified him about 8 years ago using genetic um using family what is the family genealogy, that a lot of these cold cases are being solved using this technology. And I mean, he's old man now. He's like in his 80s. But when I read that book, it's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It's an excellent book. It's by a woman named Michelle McNamara. And it is an accounting of it's nonfiction. So it's an accounting of all the victims. And it happened all in Southern California in the 70s and 80s. I had just moved to California when this book came out. And I was terrified for like months. I don't know. I mean, it's such a meticulously reported book, and the writing is so gorgeous that I couldn't put it down, even knowing I knew they hadn't caught this guy. And but I'm like, at this point, that man would be in his 70s, 80s, like he hasn't been active in years. But there was something about just being in the same environment where it happened, that really, really rattled me and got under my skin. But I think something about the crimes that I was researching for Bright Young Women, whether it was geography or just the time period that it took place in, it didn't feel like I was at risk, you know? Plenty of
Yeah,
things
that
come
makes
under,
sense.
yeah, but plenty of things do get under my skin, but just not normally the things I create myself.
Yeah, I think that completely makes sense. And we've got a another question kind of linking to what to the question that I just asked, which was do you also think that the reason you don't feel disturbed by the story is also because of how normalized female violence in our world is? Were you inspired by current events with female politics?
Um, yeah, I mean, yes, I think violence against women is very normalized. I think um I think things I've normalized a lot of things that have happened in my life. And sometimes I just think, well, it's like it's my old turf, you know? It's like I know what to expect here. So there is a sadly a comfort level that comes with this territory. I do think I've said this for a while now that like whenever I put on like a new crime show or even a scary movie, there is this promise that what you're going to see is going to be logic and reason applied. Like something bad is going to happen to someone, but then there's going to be a detective who looks into it, who puts the clues together and solves the crime. And in some cases, you're going to see the perpetrator brought to justice. But it there is something so compelling and soothing to me about getting to take in a story that I know has a resolution, because I think so many of us in real life do not get resolution. I know I didn't, and you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. So oftentimes I wonder if women are such avid fans of true crime because so many of us have been exposed to like some level of violence or violation in our own lives. And so watching it at a distance and knowing that like this story, this person might get justice, like there's something like very, very comforting. Like I often use the word like comfort around true crime and crime stories. Um, I think that's what a lot of us might be getting out of it.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's not something I've ever really thought about before, but actually it makes a lot of sense as
Hmm.
to why, yeah, a lot of us do enjoy true crime because, yeah, we get that kind of sense of it's been, I mean, don't know if resolved is the right word, but that there is something, we know the outcome of that, and yeah,
Right.
for a lot of women who have kind of gone through, um, something horrific, you kind of don't really get that. So that is a really interesting point. Absolutely. So Francesca's asked another question, and this is a bit more like going back to what we talked about previously. And she's asked, can you tell us more about what working at Cosmopolitan was like? It was a late teen and youngish adult read for me.
Um, it really was a dream. I was 23 when I started working there in 2008, and I was there from roughly like 2008 to 2012. And it was kind of like the last gasps of like the great publishing industry. And the editor in chief was like the queen of the office, and all the big important editors had like black cars, and you know like they could access the fashion closet and wear whatever they wanted and like not have to like pay for any of these designer clothes, and like we got invited to fun events and you could expense a lot of things. So it really was a dream to experience that, especially at one of my first jobs right out of college. And I wasn't making a lot of money, but I there was still like a glamorous kind of effect that came from working at a place like Cosmo, and it was published by Hearst, and Hearst itself is a beautiful building in Midtown Manhattan. It's like right at the southernmost tip of Central Park. So like after work, I would like take a walk in Central Park. Like it was really just like the most idyllic time that you can imagine. So yeah, so oftentimes I recall that period of my life with true fondness and nostalgia. Like I would go back. I would go back and experience it again.
That sounds heavenly.
It was heavenly.
Like, do I need to move?
Yes. Well, it doesn't really exist anymore. That's the sad thing. Like it's still around, but it's just like, it's not magazines just kind of don't hold the I don't know. They don't wield power like they used to, It was like it was definitely felt like Devil Wears Prada a little. In some ways that could be kind of scary and mean girl and unnecessary, but there was, I would say, the good far outweighed the bad.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, I guess it kind of like what you said earlier about like a lot of magazines and things going online as well. I think
Yeah.
like it's good accessibility wise, but it's just not as fun in some
It's
ways.
not as glossy as print.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. So, well, this is very similar to a question I was about to ask, but someone's just asked, what is one book that you wish you had written or that you would always recommend to someone?
Oh my gosh, many. Um, I love The Secret History by Donna Tartt. It was published in the 90s sometime. And are you familiar with it? The Secret.
Yeah.
Um, I pretty much always have a copy of that on my desk when I'm working because if I get stuck or I feel like my writing is like lacking like energy or flair or like anything, I will just open up to a random page of the book and like read a couple paragraphs and I feel inspired again. Um, so yeah, and I always recommend The Secret History. I just think it's such gorgeous writing and the characters are so realistic and well drawn to me. And it's, I don't know, like it straddles that line, I think, between like satire of like a certain type of university, a certain type of kind of moneyed college kid, the haves and the haves nots, and then like something very hyper realistic about it too. And there's humor in it, which I always appreciate. I like a little dash of humor with my darkness.
Oh, absolutely. I'm right with you there. And I think The Secret History has been read by quite a few of our book clubs, but for anyone watching that hasn't read that book, there you go. There's the recommendation. Um, I just asked one more question about Bright Young Women because one's come through before we kind of start to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm just walking around
Um,
to grab my glass of water because I feel like I have like something in my throat.
oh yeah, no
Go
problem.
ahead.
So someone's asked, what was it about the particular case that you wrote about in Bright Young Women that made you choose it for the focus of your novel rather than creating a fictional killer?
Well, it was the pandemic and we were all quarantined at home, and there was a new documentary on Netflix. I think it was called like The Bundy Files. And I just assumed I knew everything there was to know about that case because, like I said, I'm like a true crime junkie. I'd obviously heard the name Ted Bundy. I mean, I don't know how notorious he is outside of the United States, but like the United States is like kind of known for having serial killers. So like um I knew about like a lot of these infamous serial killers growing up just because had an interest in dark things. And when I watched the documentary, I was like, whoa, there's a lot about this I didn't know. First of all, I had always thought that he was only active in the Northeast, and I had no idea that he had committed crimes in Colorado, where he eventually was arrested, and then that he had escaped prison twice. And from there, made his way to Florida, where he committed, his final acts of violence before he was caught again and brought to trial and found guilty and eventually executed. So I didn't know about that. I just had him I had him pinned to a certain region of the country, and I didn't realize it was um his effects were felt nearly all over. And beyond that, there were just, I can't remember exactly, but there were a couple of other instances in that documentary. There was one interview with one of the house mothers of the sorority houses that he had. I think he had one of the girls from the sorority house was missing and he was suspected as having something to do with it. And there was an interview with this house mother and she was so eloquent and well spoken on the news. And I remember she was furious. And she was like, no man has a right to like come into a young woman's life and interrupt it. And I guess I just thought maybe women weren't that fierce or didn't speak like that back then. Like I thought maybe it was more of like a modern that was like more of a modern dialogue or vernacular and just I what it was like this realization that like this could have been a woman saying this in 2026. Almost it's as if no time has passed. So there is this connection between the past and the present that is enraging to me on the one level because it's like, why hasn't more changed? And what is it about? Maybe there's more to this case that I would understand um because for the precise reason that like not enough has changed. And then I just started digging into it. And then the more that I uncovered in terms of feeling like I thought I knew the story, but I had no idea, that always lights a fire under me. Like that was really the impetus for writing Luckiest Girl Alive because the story of what happened to me when I was younger um, became the narrative, became the truth, even though it wasn't the truth. And I carried that with me everywhere. Like I need my piece to be told. And so anytime I feel like there's a well-known story, but the information that people have about it is wrong and they don't have the full picture, I get like really, really impatient. And I just get this feeling of like, I have to correct the narrative, you know? And so that happened to me in writing Luckiest Girl Alive. And then it happened again with Bright Young Women and with this case in particular.
Ah, that is so interesting, and that's yeah, completely understandable. Absolutely. Um, so just a couple more questions then before we finish off, and something that I quite often like to ask whenever I do a Q&A is we've got quite a few members of the Chapter 25 book club that are aspiring writers themselves. And someone has asked in the chat as well, is there anything that you would recommend to an aspiring author?
I always recommend two writing guides, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott and On Writing by Stephen King. Um, I find both of those guides, I mean, On Writing by Stephen King is kind of like part memoir, part guide, but I find them very useful and they kind of like help me get out of a slump when I'm in one. Like I still go back to them and read them because you need like reminding of, the wisdom and you find something new every time because I feel like each time I write a book, I've learned something new about myself and my process. Um, and maybe I can then understand a part of these guides that like didn't quite speak to me when I was in the earlier years of my career. So I feel there's always something new for me to learn from these books, even though I've read them multiple times at this point. But those are two. And then I would also say, um, to make sure you're a reader in general, that you're just reading a lot. Um, it's okay to read while you're writing. That I don't know if that's like still one of those old rules that circulates, but I was always told you shouldn't be reading anyone else's work while you're writing. I find the only way I can write is when like I'm inspired by someone else's words. And then if you can join some kind of critique group, um, you know, I feel like social media would be a great place, especially on Facebook. I think there's lots of ways to like find a community like that if it's not something you can kind of create in your immediate circle of people and friends in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all really interesting. I've heard amazing things about On Writing by Stephen King. I feel like
Yeah,
I really need to pick that up.
you should. Yes. It's very interesting. He almost died in a car accident when he was probably, I guess, in his 40s. He was hit by a car on one of his walks, and it's like a miracle he survived. And so he has a lot of he's been through trauma, and he's really had to pick himself up off the floor. He's battled addiction. So he has a lot of like good life advice. Um and kind of threads that through very nicely with how he approaches writing, how he approaches story ideas and character. So yeah, making me feel like I need to read it again. It's been a couple years.
Amazing. Brilliant. So I've kind of got one final question that links into what Francesca's just asked, kind of link into what I was going to ask anyway. So Francesca's asking if like what you're working on at the moment. And I know that you've just released your new novel, Helpless. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Helpless is my new novel that just came out like 2 weeks ago. It follows Faye Heron as she returns to her college campus to attend the funeral of her beloved film writing professor. And in the years since she's graduated, she's gone on to become a successful multi-hyphenate. So she directs, she produces, she writes, and she even acts a little bit. And when she's back on campus, she has a run-in with her college ex-boyfriend who actually inspired some of her writing and some of the things that she's well known for. And she's very nervous that he's angry with her for kind of looting around their personal lives for content. But he assures her, like, it's water under the bridge. It was a long time ago. They didn't exactly treat each other well. They're both older. They've moved on. They're married. He has kids. He's like, we should get a drink and like toast to the past and like burying it. Next thing Kay knows, she wakes up and she's locked in Henry's remote lake cabin, and he will not tell her what she's doing there or why he's brought her there. And at first, naturally, she thinks like this is revenge. But as the story unfolds, you come to learn that it might have something to do with her professor's death, that she might not have all the information about it, and that she might not also have all the information about what it was that led to their breakup all those years ago. And so that is, we just announced that that is set up for a limited series. So I'm working on the outline of the pilot for that. And I've written the pilot episode for Bright Young Women, and that's with the studio. So we're just waiting to hear back from them. And that's about it for now. Yeah. And then it's vacation time. I'll deal with everything when I get back.
Absolutely, you deserve to enjoy your vacation. But that's so amazing that you've got, those things in the pipeline and
Yeah.
yeah, your new book that literally came out, yeah, literally a couple of weeks ago. Is this
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago.
yeah, so literally a couple of weeks ago. So I hope that's all boosted up your TBRs for everyone watching.
Yeah.
Amazing. So yeah, we've come to the end of it. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening. It's been a really fun evening, and of course, a huge thank you to you, Jessica Knoll, for taking time out of your vacation to speak to us. That's very kind of you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And thank you everyone for joining tonight.